The Hargrove Grand had a way of making certain people feel invisible before they even reached the front door. It was not written in any policy. No staff manual contained the instruction. But the lesson was taught in smaller ways, in the precise angle a doorman's gaze traveled when someone arrived without luggage worth noticing, in the practiced pause a front desk clerk inserted before deciding whether a person deserved a full smile or a partial one. The Hargrove Grand Hotel stood on Peachtree Street, in the kind of Atlanta neighborhood where the sidewalks were power washed twice a week, and the trees were wrapped in small lights that never came down after Christmas, because they had been hired permanently to make the block feel more expensive than it already was. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, a man named Daniel Cruz walked through the hotel's revolving door holding his daughter's hand. Daniel Cruz was 41 years old. He worked as a commercial electrician for a mid-sized contractor out of Decatur, the kind of job that meant early mornings, concrete floors, and the particular exhaustion that settles into a man's shoulders when he has been climbing ladders since before the city woke up. He was broad through the chest and slightly taller than average, with dark skin and close-cut hair that had begun to silver at the temples in the past year. His work boots were clean. He had wiped them that morning on the mat outside his apartment because he always did, because his mother had taught him that a man who did not respect his own shoes did not respect himself. His jeans were dark and pressed. The flannel he wore over a gray shirt had been a birthday gift from his daughter, and still carried the fold lines from the gift box. Beside him walked Amara Cruz, 7 years old, with her father's same steady brown eyes and her mother's gap between her front teeth that she had recently decided was something to be proud of rather than embarrassed about. She wore a rust-colored corduroy jacket over a white turtleneck, her hair in 2 puffballs held with yellow bands. She carried a small backpack shaped like a turtle that she should name Gerald. Inside Gerald's shell were a library book, a pouch of colored pencils, and a folded piece of paper she had drawn on during the car ride. A picture of a horse standing next to a tree. Daniel had driven 40 minutes from the east side to bring his daughter here for one specific reason. His father, Warren Cruz, 73 years old, had called the night before and asked whether they could meet for lunch. Not at a diner, not at the barbecue place they usually went to on the old man's birthday. At the Hargrove. Warren had said it simply, without ceremony, that he wanted to take his son and granddaughter somewhere nice, while his knees still permitted it. Daniel had said yes without thinking about what he would wear. He was thinking about it now. The lobby of the Hargrove Grand had ceilings that rose 40 feet and columns of veined marble that reflected the afternoon light in soft ribbons across the floor. A pianist near the far window was playing something Daniel recognized but could not name. There were flower arrangements at the center of the space that were taller than Amara, white blooms and dark green branches, arranged with the kind of deliberate artlessness that cost an extraordinary amount of money to achieve. The guests moving through the space wore the soft, unhurried expression of people for whom this was ordinary. Daniel spotted his father before Warren spotted him. The old man was seated in one of the low-back chairs near the elevator bank, his hat in his lap, his gray overcoat folded over the armrest. Warren Cruz, at 73, was a man who had spent 4 decades as a pipefitter, and the work had left its record in the way he held himself, careful but straight, with the quiet authority of someone who had learned to read pressure gauges and trust what they told him. His face was deeply lined. His hands were large and still. He wore a pale blue dress shirt buttoned to the collar, his brown wool trousers, and shoes that had been shined, Daniel could tell from across the lobby, that very morning. Warren had been waiting long enough that a younger guest had taken the chair beside him without acknowledging him. 2 hotel staff had passed within arm's reach. Neither had stopped to ask if he needed assistance. Amara saw her grandfather first and broke from her father's hand. She crossed the lobby in the quick-footed way of a child who has decided that distance is a problem to be solved at speed, and Warren's whole face changed when he saw her coming. He pushed himself up from the chair, with one hand on the armrest steadying himself, and opened his arms. They did not see the woman who had been watching. Constance Aldridge, 39 years old, was the assistant general manager of the Hargrove Grand. She had been in hospitality for 15 years and had risen through the ranks at 3 different properties by understanding, precisely and early, what kind of guest each property was designed to serve and what kind was not. She had a lean, composed face and dark hair, drawn back in a knot so severe it appeared structural. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white blouse, a fitted skirt, and heels that made her 2 inches taller than she actually was. She had been standing near the concierge desk when Warren Cruz sat down 40 minutes earlier. She had noted his coat, she had noted his shoes, she had noted the careful, watchful stillness of a man waiting for someone he trusted to arrive. She had not sent anyone to assist him. When Daniel walked through the door, she noted him too, in the way she noted assessment conducted, a professional smile, directed at someone else entirely. She made a small movement with 2 fingers toward the lobby attendant, stationed near the west entrance. His name was Preston Holt. He was 26, and had been working at the Hargrove for 8 months. He was not unkind by nature. He had taken the job because it paid $11 more per hour than the warehouse position he had held before. And he had a car payment and a sister in college. He had learned in his 8 months that the attendants who kept their jobs longest were the ones who could read the room without being asked to. He read the room. He crossed the lobby and inserted himself between the elevator bank and the small reunion happening near the chairs. He addressed Warren first, then Daniel, his voice carrying the precise warmth of a man who had practiced it. He told the lobby seating was reserved for registered hotel guests and those with confirmed dining reservations. He asked if they had a reservation. Warren looked up from his granddaughter, who had both arms around his neck, and said that yes, he had called ahead for the Hearthstone restaurant at 1 o'clock. Preston's expression did not change entirely, but something shifted inside it. The way water shifts when a stone drops in without breaking the surface. He said he would need to verify the reservation and asked for the name. Warren told him, Warren Cruz. Party of 3. Preston said he would check with the restaurant and ask them to wait. The word wait landed with a particular weight that Daniel understood immediately, because he had heard it before. Delivered by different people, always in the same tone. The tone that meant the waiting was the point. Amara, still holding her grandfather's hand, watched Preston walk away with the attention of a child who does not yet know how to pretend not to be watching something. Daniel stood beside his father and said nothing. He had long since learned the cost of saying something too quickly in places like this. Preston reached the concierge desk and spoke in a low voice to the young woman there. She glanced once toward the elevator bank, then bent her head to the computer. The exchange lasted longer than it needed to. When Preston returned, he said the restaurant did show a reservation under the name Cruz, but that the Hearthstone had a dress code for lunch service and that he would need to speak with the dining room manager before seating could be confirmed. Warren said quietly that he had eaten at the Hearthstone 4 times before. Preston said he understood and that he would arrange a conversation with the manager. The manager's name was Derek Fain. He was 44, thick-shouldered, with a permanently dissatisfied expression that he had mistaken for professionalism. He arrived at the lobby edge 2 minutes later and took in the scene with the swiftness of a man accustomed to making fast evaluations he would never have to defend. He addressed Daniel. He said he was sure they understood that the Hearthstone maintained certain standards for the dining experience of its guests. He said the lunch service was nearly full and that he wanted to ensure their reservation was appropriately accommodated. He said the words carefully, without accusation, but the direction of his eyes when he spoke was not careful. They moved, briefly, but unmistakably, to Daniel's flannel shirt, to Warren's wool overcoat, to Amara's corduroy jacket and turtle backpack. Daniel asked him, without inflection, whether their reservation was valid. Derek said the reservation was in the system. Yes, but that he wanted to speak with them directly before seating was confirmed. Daniel asked him what specifically he needed to speak with them about. Derek's professional composure flickered. He said the restaurant took the experience of all its guests seriously, and that they tried to be proactive about any concerns. Daniel said, mildly, that he did not have any concerns. He said his father had called ahead, had dressed appropriately, and had been waiting in the lobby for nearly an hour for his family to arrive. He said he was not sure what information a conversation with Derek would provide that a confirmed reservation had not already covered. A small silence opened between them. Amara, who had been standing close to her grandfather, turned her face up toward her father. She did not say anything. She simply looked at him with the particular alertness of a child who does not yet have the vocabulary for what she is watching, but understands that something is being decided. Derek shifted his weight. He said he wanted to be clear that the hotel welcomed all guests. He said the restaurant would be happy to seat them. He said it with the smoothness of a man changing course, without admitting he had been on any other course. What happened next was not loud. From across the lobby, near the elevator bank, a woman in her early 50s had been watching since Preston first crossed the floor. She was slight, with silver-streaked hair she wore, loose around her shoulders, dressed in a dark wool blazer and simple slacks. She had arrived without announcement, which was the way she preferred to arrive. She had a habit, which her assistant found maddening, of walking through her own properties as if she were a guest. She had checked in under a different name. She had eaten breakfast at the counter of the lobby cafe that morning and tipped in cash. Her name was Josephine Hargrove Obi, 52 years old. And she had inherited the Hargrove Grand from her father 18 years earlier, and had spent those 18 years turning a single Atlanta hotel into a collection of 9, each one built on the original property's reputation for something her father had called earned elegance. He had meant that the quality had to be real enough to deserve the price, and the price had to be honest enough that the quality was not a disguise for something uglier underneath. She had come to Atlanta from Chicago because she had received a letter. It was handwritten, 2 pages, sent to her corporate office in early October by a man who identified himself only as a former guest. He described what he had experienced on 3 separate visits to the Hargrove Grand over the past 2 years. Specific incidents, specific language used by specific members of staff, specific moments in which guests who did not fit a certain profile were made to feel that they had arrived somewhere that did not want them. He said he was not writing to threaten. He said he was writing because the hotel had his grandfather's name on it, and he did not think the hotel should be doing to other people what had once been done to the man the building was named after. Josephine had read the letter twice on a Sunday morning and had then called no one. She had booked a room under a false name and purchased a train ticket to Atlanta. She crossed the lobby now without hurrying. She came to stand behind Preston and to the right of Derek, close enough that both men sensed her presence before they placed it. Derek turned first. The recognition moved through his face the way a tide moves out, quickly and completely. Josephine looked at Derek. She asked him, in a voice that was entirely level, what was happening. Derek said there had been a small question about the reservation and the dress code, and that he had been clarifying things with the guests. Josephine said she was not asking for a summary. She asked him to describe specifically what concern the reservation or the dress code had presented. Derek's mouth opened. The words that came out were the same words he had used before: experience of all guests, proactive about concerns, but in this context they sounded different. Or rather, they sounded like what they were, which was the careful language of a man who had learned to do an unkind thing in a kind-sounding way. Josephine let him finish. Then she stepped past him and looked at Warren. She asked him if he was all right. Warren said he was fine, which was the word men of his genre fine, but had decided to keep the rest private. Josephine crouched slightly to bring herself to Amara's eye level. She asked the little girl what was in her backpack. Amara said his name was Gerald and he carried her important things. Josephine said that sounded like a very reliable backpack. Amara said he was, She said Gerald was the most reliable turtle she had ever met, which was technically all the turtles, but still. Josephine smiled, and it was the first entirely unguarded expression that had appeared in the lobby in the past quarter hour. She straightened and looked at Daniel. He had been watching her since she crossed the floor. He had the stillness of a man who had learned to assess a situation and wait for more information before acting. Not because he lacked the impulse to act, but because he had learned that patience in moments like this sometimes revealed things that speed would have closed off. She said she wanted to apologize. She did not offer the apology with the cushioning of corporate language. She said that his father had come here for lunch with his family, and had been made to wait without cause, and had then been approached by staff who questioned a confirmed reservation under the pretense of standards they applied selectively. She said it plainly, the way a fact is stated, because she had found that people who had been treated poorly did not need the thing described to them in gentler terms. They had already lived it. What they sometimes needed was simply for someone with authority to say what it was. Daniel did not respond immediately. He had not been expecting the directness. He said after a moment that he appreciated her saying so. Warren said he was not interested in making trouble. He said he had come to have lunch with his son and granddaughter because his knees had been giving him difficulty, and he did not know how many more trips across town he would be able to make on his own, and he had wanted to do something that felt like an occasion. Josephine looked at him when he said it. She did not look away. She asked Warren if he would allow her to join them for lunch. Warren looked at his son. Daniel looked at his daughter. Amara looked at Josephine and asked if she liked horses. Josephine said she had grown up with two of them, that their names had been Biscuit, and a horse her younger brother had inexplicably named Senator. Amara reached into Gerald and produced the folded drawing from the car ride. She held it out. Josephine took it with both hands. What happened in the Hearthstone restaurant, formed for the next 90 minutes, did not make noise. There was no confrontation in the dining room. No raised voice, no scene. There was a table set by the window that looked out over the garden, and there was a grandfather who ordered the short rib, and then spent 20 minutes telling Amara about the time he had nearly electrocuted himself, trying to fix a water heater in 1987. A story Daniel had heard many times, and which became more dramatic at each telling. And there was Josephine, who sat across from Warren, and listened with the full attention of a person who had no other place she was supposed to be. She asked about the pipe fitting. Warren talked about it the way he talked about it with people who genuinely wanted to know, which was to say he talked about it for a long time and included details no one had asked for. About pressure differentials, and the particular sound a well-fitted joint makes when it seats correctly. A small satisfied click that he said he had loved for 38 years. Daniel said almost nothing during lunch, which was not unusual. He was the kind of man who measured a room by listening to it. Watched his daughter draw a second horse on the back of the place card. He watched his father's shoulders, which had been tight when they walked in, gradually settle into the posture of a man who had decided the afternoon was going to be all right. Somewhere in the second hour, when the table had been cleared, and Amara was coloring quietly with the pencils she had retrieved from Gerald's shell, Josephine told them the truth about why she was there. She told them about the letter. She did not identify who had written it, because she did not know, and she said she was not sure it mattered who had written it, only that what it described had been written at all, and had been, on this afternoon, confirmed. She told them that she had read the letter on a Sunday, and had not called anyone, because she had learned over the years that the gap between what a company believes it does and what it actually does is best measured by showing up unannounced. Daniel asked her what she was going to do about it. She said she had already made several decisions. She said Preston was going to receive a formal warning, documented. She said Derek Fain would be placed on a performance improvement plan with a 60-day review. And if the review confirmed what the afternoon had suggested, his employment would end. She said Constance Aldridge, whose instruction Preston had been following, which Josephine had understood by the way Preston moved, The practiced efficiency of a man carrying out a direction rather than acting on his own judgment would be called to a meeting the following morning, from which she would not return to her current position. She said these things quietly, to Daniel, without theater. She was not performing. She was reporting. Daniel said after she finished that he had not come here to get anyone fired. Josephine said she knew that. She said she was not doing it because he had come here. She said she was doing it because the afternoon had made clear that the people who worked in her grandmother's building had lost sight of a principle her grandmother had written into the first employee handbook. In 1961, in language that had not been elegant but had been true, that a guest is anyone who comes through the door in good faith, and that the door has no exceptions. Warren, who had been listening, said that was a very good sentence. Josephine said her grandmother had written better ones, but that one had stuck. Amara asked if anyone wanted to see the new horse. She had given this one a name, she said. She had named him Practical. Everyone at the table agreed that was a very good name for a horse. 3 weeks later, Daniel received a letter on paper embossed with the Hargrove Holdings letterhead. Inside was a handwritten note from Josephine and a second document, a formal letter from the hotel's legal office. The formal letter explained that the Hargrove Grand had reviewed its guest conduct protocols across all 9 properties, and had retained an outside firm to conduct blind audits of how guests across different demographics were received, assisted, and accommodated from the moment of entry through the conclusion of their stay. The results of the audit would be made available to staff at all levels, along with a revised training framework. The handwritten note was brief. It said that the afternoon had reminded her of something she had known when she was younger, and had let herself be crowded away from, by the practicalities of running a large business. That a place does not earn its reputation in its best moments. It earns it in the moments when no one important is watching, and the people inside it still do the right thing. Daniel read the note twice, then set it on the kitchen counter, and went to help Amara finish her homework, a worksheet about fractions that she had declared an injustice, which Daniel privately agreed with, though he did not say so, because he was her father, and it was not yet time for her to know that fractions were an injustice. He thought about calling his father to tell him about the letter. Then he thought about what his father would say. Warren would say that he was glad things were being handled, and then he would ask whether Daniel had eaten, because Warren believed most problems were made harder by hunger, and that it was a father's job to ask. Daniel called him. Warren asked if he had eaten. Daniel said he had. Warren was quiet for a moment. Then he said that Amara had drawn him another horse and mailed it to his apartment, and that he had taped it to the refrigerator next to the picture of Daniel's mother. He said the horse's name, which Amara had written in pencil at the bottom, was Practical too, because apparently there was now a series. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He said that sounded right. Outside the window of his apartment, the city moved through the ordinary business of a weeknight. The cars, and the late buses and the light that came and went between the buildings. His daughter was at the table behind him, narrating a conversation between 2 colored pencils that had apparently developed a disagreement about something. His father was on the other end of the phone, 3 miles away, at the kitchen table, where he had sat for 40 years. There were places in the world that measured a person by what was visible, by the label on a coat, by the brand of a shoe, by whether a reservation sounded like someone who belonged. There would always be those places, and the people inside them who had learned to treat a stranger's dignity as a negotiable thing, worth protecting only when the stranger turned out to matter to someone important. What no such place could account for was a man who already knew the answer to that question before it was asked, who had decided somewhere before the rotating door and the marble lobby, and the practiced smile of the attendant crossing the floor, that every person his daughter watched him encounter was a lesson she would carry, and that there was only one lesson worth giving. Amara looked up from the table. She asked her father who he was talking to. He said Grandpa. She said to tell Grandpa that Practical 2 was named after Practical, in case he had not noticed. Daniel told him. Warren said he had noticed. He said it was a fine tradition.